Hi, let's talk about gear. So there's a couple tools that you're gonna wanna have every time that you go out fly fishing. And the first tool we're gonna talk about is your forceps or your nippers. This tool is 2-in-1, so you have your forceps here and the nipper part there. These are very important to remove hooks out of fish. You can also use the clamp part here to pinch down barbs to debarb your hooks. But that is a very important tool to always bring with you. This is another style, similar tool. This one just doesn't have the plier or the forceps attachment. This is only the nipper part for cutting your fly line. These are really handy, and every time you tie a knot, you're going to want to clip your tag end off by using a tool like this. So moving on, another tool that is useful, not always a tool that you need, but sure is nice if you do need it, is the hook sharpener. So they come in a lot of different shapes and sizes, but they all have a little notch in the file for you to run the hook in to get to a nice sharp point again. These are handy if you're fishing somewhere where there's lots of rocks that your hook is banging up against and maybe getting a little bit dull. So another good thing to have with you when you're out fishing. Let's move on to a couple of other tools. These ones you might not always need, but they are nice to have. So something like bear spray if you're out in the mountains, pretty much anywhere where you're not in the city, in the Rockies anyways. It's always a good idea to have bear spray on you. Typically, waterways are also animal highways, so there's a good chance that if you're out in remote areas that you will come across some wildlife, potentially some bears. Another thing that you might be interested in having, it's a lot smaller to carry, are bear bangers. So these are just a small tool which basically launch a loud explosive bang to ward off any bears or predators that you don't want near you. These are a little bit trickier because you do have to set them up, but they're nice to have if you ever need to use one. Moving on to something that you always want to have is a little first aid kit. So when you're out fishing, if you hook yourself, if you fall and trip, you get cuts, bruises, anything where you might need to patch yourself up, it's always good to have a first aid kit. And not only for yourself, for other people that you're fishing with or that you might come across. It's always nice to have a little bit of medical gear to help them out. Another thing that is a must are a good pair of sunglasses. The water bounces light just like snow would, so it can be quite hard on the eyes if you're not wearing sunglasses. There's a couple of other great uses for sunglasses, such as protecting your eyes from flying hooks. That is probably the worst place you can ever get hooked, and if you wear sunglasses, you don't ever have to worry about that. The other thing is that if you have polarized sunglasses, they'll help you see into the water. So if you're out there and you're looking for things like structure, depth, or even fish, those polarized lenses are really going to help you have an edge on maybe if you don't have sunglasses on, just to see the water and the structures. Okay, now a couple more things. So these are more related to your flies and the fishing aspect. So we have two types of floatant. So if you were dry fly fishing, these tools will help your fly stay up on top of the water. The two most common types are the gel. So this is basically an oil-like substance that you'll just squirt onto your fly, rub it around in the fibers, and because oil and water don't mix, this will help keep it pushed up high in the water. This is also a floatant. This stuff is basically a powder that removes moisture from your fly and you'll just put your fly in here, give it a shake, and that should strip moisture from your flies, again helping them float on top of the water, and yeah, have more success. Dry flies don't really work if they're sinking, so it's good to have a couple of these on standby if you need them. And then the opposite thing, so if you're fishing nymphs or streamers that you want to sink, these are called split shots, and they're basically just small little weights that clamp onto your leader, and that'll just help give a little bit extra weight to your flies to sink them down deep enough where the fish can see them. And they're really handy and really easy to use. So another piece of gear that is really useful that you'll always want to have with you are indicators. There's a couple different names for them: bobbers, floats. The correct term would be a strike indicator, but whatever works for you. They come in a bunch of different varieties. You have the older styles that will thread onto your line and then put a toothpick or a stick in there to prevent it from sliding. And then some of the newer ones that have a little screw on them where you basically clip in your fly line, screw it on, and then it won't slide around. And then you have the really new ones that kind of screw in half. Again, you put your fly line in the clip there, put the other half on, and screw it in there. And these are what you're going to use if you're ever nymphing. Basically, your nymph will be attached to your leader underneath the indicator, floating along. If that indicator goes down, you know you've had a bite. So these are also, it's really good to have a couple extra of these. Sometimes you lose them, but you definitely don't want to leave home without a couple of indicators. The last piece of gear that you're always going to want to have is some sort of landing net or fishing net. Again, the size of your net is probably going to translate to the size of fish that you're going to catch. If you're fishing for just little fish, you probably can get away with quite a small net. That's easy to carry. If you're fishing for really big fish, then obviously you're going to need a net big enough to safely land those fish for you. Something important about nets is the type of material that the basket of the net is made out of. Some older styles, they'll use string, and that's okay for landing the fish. However, it's a little bit hard on the fish themselves. It's harder on their scales and the slime coating on their bodies. It's also not very good for hooks. If you get hooked in the string, they tend not to want to come out. Most nets nowadays are made with a rubber basket, which is really gentle on the fish, and your hooks won't get stuck in it. But yeah, you'll always want to have some sort of net just to safely land your fish, but also it's cool to catch fish and to see them up close, and if you don't have a net, it's really hard to do that. I think that's pretty much all for the necessities of gear that you want to have on your next trip when you go out fishing.